Hi, Theresa. Welcome to the Happy Healthy Caregiver podcast.
Hi, Elizabeth. Thanks for having me on.
So excited to have you today. We've been planning this for a while, and it takes me a while to get to the guests because we only do a show every other week. So it is what it is. I also like to start off the shows with some inspiration, words of wisdom. And so I'd love to get your thoughts on this before we dive into caregiving and self care and all the resources that I know that you're going to share with everybody. So today's little wisdom says, make today awesome, or make today so awesome, rather, that yesterday gets jealous.
Ooh, I like that. Yeah, if it's so important to wake up each day and think this is a new day, new opportunities. And I've started waking up, and the first thing I'm thinking is like, what am I devoted to? I ask myself that question, and it
Mm.
kind of puts me in the right frame of mind and gives me that perspective to focus like immediately when I wake up. So I love that.
What are
So
you
today,
devoted
so
to today? I want to know.
awesome that yesterday's jealous. Ooh, today I usually it's quite the same. It's just, connecting with caregivers and helping them have a better day, helping them along their journey.
Hmm.
And, along with just making sure that, family feels like their priority as well. But yeah, it's
I,
I love that. Let's make tomorrow jealous.
Let's make tomorrow jealous. So we've known each other for at least a few years. I feel like we met as certified caregiving consultants and just connected at one of the conferences, the caregiving.com, the national conference. I know your story and I've read about your story, which we're going to dive into your book. You gave me an advanced reader copy, so mine has a little band across it if people are watching the video, but it'll be out when this comes out. But tell us, Teresa, a little bit about your caregiving story.
Okay, well, it started before I knew I was a caregiver. So, I'll start with when I realized it. I was caring for dad for 7 years. So, my husband and I were living in France, and dad had a fire. And while I talked to him, every day and things seemed to be going fine, this fire was sort of a wake up call because he downplayed it, and it turned out it was much more significant than what he had shared. And I just got this nagging feeling that we needed to be closer than an ocean away. So we moved back, and dad was 94 at the time, but he was managing fine. He was driving, he was handling all of his finances, and everything was going on fine. And then a year after we moved back, he had a stroke.
Mm.
And I think that was the moment, sitting in the hospital, when I realized I'm not just helping out anymore. I didn't connect that to caregiving. But now, what does the future hold? But looking back, I was involved with his care in France, and I would, advocate for him. I saw that somebody had, he shared somebody was trying to get him a better quote on insurance rates, and he had awesome insurance. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this could totally change, his opportunities. And so I was getting involved and telling folks, and setting boundaries and doing all these things that I didn't realize were caregiving before I was his caregiver. And then I found that I was so completely overwhelmed after he had this stroke, because I didn't know which direction to turn. I was given that, infamous list from the hospital of resources, and I go home and it's like 3 a.m. I wake up and in tears practically, because I don't know what he's going to need. And I'm just reaching out to all these organizations, I have no idea, and getting on waiting lists. And then he comes home and he can no longer drive. And just everything changed from there as he started to lose his independence. And I started to try to keep him safe.
Mm.
The battles began. So he passed about a year ago, and looking back, hindsight's 2020, and you can just see so many things that I wish I had known and wish I had done differently, which is why I got into the work of helping other caregivers. Because looking back and saying, some these things didn't have to be as hard as they were if I had known about these resources sooner and understood better, the help that we could get. But it wasn't just the resources. Even when I found those resources, I still struggled. The emotional aspect really was what I found the most challenging.
Hmm.
I decided to help caregivers, but still knew that I needed to figure out this emotional aspect for myself before I could help others with that. So that
Yeah.
became a journey for me.
So many things there to unpack and some follow-up questions for you, Teresa. Is like when you say they gave you so many resources, did they give you resources to help better care for him, or were they also resources to help you as a caregiver?
Oh, good question. Yes, they were absolutely to care for him. And it was just this packet in a list. And I remember when the social worker at the hospital handed it to me, she just handed it to me. And I said, well, what's this? And she said, oh, these are some things you might need to, help you care for your dad. So yeah, there was never the thought that I might need help. It wasn't until his physical therapist in the home, the rehab after the rehab facility, he said, "You're not going to be able to continue to do this. Like, this is going to destroy you." And those words didn't sink in. He had seen it with so many other family caregivers. So no, I didn't connect that I needed help and I needed that emotional support until well into even starting, to work with other family caregivers. Yeah.
I'm curious too, because what France is one of my favorite places. Where did you all live and what were you doing over there? I'm just curious.
Yeah, it was awesome. So we lived in the Loire Valley for 4 years and Normandy for 3. And that was
Nice.
really cool because we were not in Paris. So we didn't have, and so I have really,
Oh, sorry. Sorry. Go ahead. Restart the France part and I'll cut
okay.
this out.
Okay. Yeah, so we lived in the Loire Valley for 4 years and Normandy for 3 years. And what was great about that was that in the country, nobody spoke English. So it was a crash course. I did not speak French, and I learned, what I learned before we went, and then learned from our, just our neighbors and, the commerçants, the shop owners who became friends because we were living in a small town of 6,000 people, and it was the most amazing experience. And then the next town we lived in was 2,000 people. So we had 50 visitors over we were there for 7 years. It's like we're in the 7 year period. It was 7 years in France, 7 years of caregiving. So, but we had 50 visitors come and stay with us for anywhere from like 3 days to 5 weeks. And I was tour guide. My husband is an engineer, and so he was actually there for his work, and he was on a French contract. So it was open ended, and we had all the opportunity of the French vacations and traveled with his work. And it was life changing. It was really, and dad came twice. So dad came when he was 89, and he came when he was, I want to say 91, and we were able to share that with him. He stayed for I think 2 or 3 weeks each time, and it was just incredible.
That's awesome. That's lovely. I wish I knew you back when you were living in France because it's one of my favorite places. We would just probably eat and drink our way through there, though. You wouldn't have to take me around to sightsee too much. Um, I love that. And thank you for sharing about the resource part. And I find it's interesting, how long you went before you really saw the role that you had and what could happen. Where did this concept? So your book is called Navigating the Caregiver River, a journey to sustainable caregiving. Where did this whole concept of sustainable caregiving, when did this like hit you?
It hit me when I realized that the path I was on was not sustainable. And I'd say that was at that moment that I realized I needed to figure out, like you say, unpack, why is this so hard? Because now I have the resources, I have help coming in. I feel like we have the support for transportation and all these other things, but it's still just so hard. And every day, the things that I thought should help me with self-care, like going on a run, it I'd come back more frustrated than when I left, because
Mm,
all I would do is ruminate, and just those circular arguments about why dad shouldn't be driving would just go round and round in my head. So I'd come back and I'd just be we're in a worse place than I was when I left, ready to go, have those arguments again. And it wasn't, I just knew that I couldn't continue this way. If running wasn't helping me, if all my go-to things that used to make me feel better weren't helping, what am I going to do? And I started to figure it out and just look into, what is going to be a good foundation. And I learned that if I practice mindfulness and combine that with running, those two things work together. If I set boundaries, then this anger, that's why I was feeling angry. So it was recognizing that the path I was on was not sustainable, and then figuring out how to make it sustainable. I wish I had done it sooner. I wouldn't have gotten burned out. I think it would
mhm.
have prevented me from getting burned out, but it was able to get me out of that place so that I could move forward and
Well,
just
it's
be
going
a
to help someone
better
else burn out for sure.
hopefully. Yeah.
Yes, and then the concept of the analogy that you use for the river
Yeah.
is also interesting. Maybe talk about that for a minute.
Yes, I just felt like I was drowning. I really connected when I was in the worst place to drowning. And so then started to think of all these water references. I do paddle, not whitewater kayaking, but have done, just a lot of paddling. And so I'm like, you know what? It feels like it's like being in the rapids, but not being in them. It feels like I'm hanging on to the back of the boat, like I'm about to get, tossed into the water. And so it just started to make me think about, you don't know what's up ahead around the next corner. It could be a waterfall. And how do we feel more confident on the water? It's by training, and then you're able to navigate. And I wanted to get to that place where I felt like, yeah, it's hard. Like the river's not going to change. There's still going to be rapids, and there are going to be obstacles, logs down across the river. But with better skills, I can navigate the river better. And that just led to that sustainable journey, because it is a journey. I mean, we have no idea how long we're going to be caring for a family member. My dad my folks took care of my dad's mom. She lived to be 104. And I thought dad was on that path. You don't know. I thought it could easily be another 4 or 5 years, when he was 98, 90 and turn 99. So the river really spoke to me.
Yes, and you're so right. Like you don't know what's around the river bend. Isn't that like a Pocahontas song? What's around the river or something like that? So that might be something you can incorporate into your thing. But yeah, the Pocahontas. Talks about the river a lot. Do you have what when you talk in your book about the larger caregiving objectives and like these win-win outcomes, is there anything you can kind of spotlight as far as like what can someone hope to glean out of this book that you are hoping is going to put them on a better trajectory there with their care recipient?
Yeah. So I think back to when I was so consumed with all the day-to-day, just the concerns about keeping dad safe, and what that turned into were, I call them like these little skirmishes or battles. And it's because, dad just wanted his independence. He wanted to feel independent. He had experienced all these losses. He was no longer able to drive. The medicine management, things that helped him feel like he was in control of his own life, he had lost. And I was just trying to keep him safe and didn't recognize how that was really conflicting with what his desire was and what his needs were. And the driving was a big one. The medication management was a big one. He switched to driving his golf cart, and he would go onto these major streets. It was just like I was always at this fight or flight place of worry about him. And I do want to talk about blueberries for a minute, though, because as big as all those were, blueberries also caused this stress. This silly blueberry bag that was resealable that he would tear into. We all ate blueberries, and at this point we were living with him. At different points, we weren't living in the same space with him, but and he felt like if he needed us, we were there. And so we tried all these things, putting in the blueberries in containers for him. We'd hide the blueberry bag in the back, and I'm like, oh my gosh, Dad. In his eyesight, he had macular degeneration and he had glaucoma. And so he couldn't see, he just wanted his blueberries. And I think it was at that moment. And for me as a caregiver, and I know other caregivers have said they get that, like you're so frustrated with all the other things that even blueberries can tip you into that space of just, and but looking at it from the outside, you're like, blueberries, really? And I think that's when I realized what is happening here. Like, I really need to get this in check, understand, have empathy, understand he really needs to feel independent, and keep that big picture in mind. We had a great relationship before we stepped into these roles, and I didn't want to see that. I didn't want those to be the last years or memories of this, struggle between us, these battles. So that's what led me to think about, what are the overall objectives? What do I want really to achieve from these years of caregiving? I want us to have a great relationship. I want him to feel supported. And how can I do that? Well, the battles have to stop. The battle armor has to come off. I have to look at things from his perspective and say, what's the worst that could happen? And I just stopped. I would still worry about him taking that golf cart places he shouldn't go, but I accepted it. So
It's and you actually got way more accepting than just the golf cart. Your dad jumped out of an airplane and he was in his 90s, wasn't he?
he actually didn't, but we were there, signed up. He was ready to go up. So yeah, this was the biggest lesson for me in the entire accepting lesson and the experience of caregiving. So he wanted to jump out of a plane for his 94th birthday. He insisted. He just wouldn't stop talking about it. And every time he brought it up, I just would start hyperventilating. And I'm like, Dad, come on. But he would not every day. And he knew it was pushing my buttons too. So he really enjoyed bringing it up, but he really wanted to do it. And we were at a doctor's appointment with his primary care physician, and Dr. Goldstein, just, we loved him. And he shared this with Dr. Goldstein, and Dr. Goldstein said, well, why not? And I'm like, in my mind, I'm going, what? And then I'm like, okay, all right, why not? So I started making it possible. And I went and talked to a person at Veterans Affairs who actually takes folks out for PTSD and they jump. And I said, do you think this is something that Dad could do? He goes, yep, if the doctor signed off on it, we can do it. So I'm like, all right. So I got him signed up and we went to the site, and I went with my brother and his daughter. We're going to jump with Dad. Bud, one of his really close friends, was there. Bud was whispering in my ear the whole time, this is a bad idea. And I'm like, look, I know. And every family and friends were like, what are you doing? And I'm like, look, you can either get on board. Like, it took me so long to support this
They're
that
not in your shoes,
I
and
couldn't deal with
yeah.
yeah, I'm like, this is what we're doing. And so we get there and Dad's trying to back out. He's trying to back out from the minute we get up that morning. I'm like, oh no, you're doing this. And I thought, at least we need to get there. And he said, if he says no, then we'll, obviously he'll not do it. But we've, done a lot of work to get to this point. When we get there and he's signed up, ready to go, the jump person comes over and says, I think I can land him on his feet. In my mind, I'm like, that's a broken leg. Like, seriously, it couldn't get any worse than this. Because normally, with somebody they're concerned about, they'd slide in, make it a little safer. So no, we're going, we're doing it. And then this last group came down, and they were a group of instructors, and they said the winds were up just way too high. It's not safe to go up right now. And so Dad had the option to wait or to just change it and we'll come back another day. And he just decided he didn't want to go up. He didn't want to wait. So he would have done it. I really think he would have done it. And it was really cool that we got him to that point and he had that opportunity and that option. And in his mind, all he remembered, he didn't remember that he decided not to go. He remembered the winds got up and it wasn't possible for him to go. And that was perfect. I didn't remind him that the whole day he didn't, he said,
Yeah, you weren't the barrier. It was Mother Nature. And
exactly.
then the script every day of him, saying he wants to go, hopefully that dwindled down and he was like, close enough.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
He was very happy that he was going to do it and then just couldn't.
But I mean, from that point, it's like everything else, it seems like, okay, I loved what you say. Why not? Like, maybe that's the question we just need to ask ourselves. It's like, why not? What's the harm in that?
And the shift that happened for me was the big shift was, okay, he might end up in the hospital with a broken leg, and then we'll deal with that. And I think when I realized that, I was, you know what, I can deal with that. We can deal with that. Whatever, if something happens, which was my biggest worry. And I realized it would impact, Joe, my husband and I, and all of us quite a bit, but that's okay. I needed to accept that this isn't about me right now. This is about him. He's on this journey to end of life. I mean, he's further, we all are, right? He's farther along. Let's try to make this the best possible for him. And once I accepted that I could deal with whatever, like you say, whatever ramifications, whatever comes from it, why not? Let's just do it.
And I that's not on my bucket list. Like, will never be. My son wants to go for his upcoming birthday. So my husband's going back, like, no desire. But so I don't want to project my fears on other people either. There were so many little tidbits that I got gleaned from your book. And so some of them were, resistance equals stress, acceptance equals peace. Like, that was kind of a big topic. And that anytime you're angry, that is a signal that there's some kind of a managing expectations or setting boundaries or some kind of system is needed. I did just talk to this mediator and she was funny. She's like, I don't like the word boundary. I was like, okay. And she said, well, I like to think that there's a door and it's not like a wall. And I don't know what made me think of that, but the word boundary, now I'm like, but it is what it is. Setting boundaries just means like, we got to protect who we are. And then another thing too, that was a flip the script. You say, instead of I have to do X, Y, Z, I get to. And what a difference that one word shift from have to get to can make. And then the I versus you language. So there's really, really practical things in your book, Theresa, that I think are going to help caregivers communicate with their loved ones and the care recipients better.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, all of those really made a difference for me. I can, listening to you share them, I can think of how they each help me have a shift in my perspective, which then helped me embrace the caregiving journey. And, it's not, it can be hard to hear, and if you're drowning, when I was drowning, if somebody'd say, well, you should consider the fact that you get to be a caregiver, not that you have to be a caregiver, I would not have received that very well. So it
Yeah.
is a process to get there. But each of those things, and recognizing how boundaries play a part in our caregiving journey. I had heard the word term boundaries. I used them at work, didn't really connect with them.
Hmm.
Like that's what I was doing. But in caregiving, it's also personal, and boundaries. I, even when I recognized that I needed to set them and started setting them, recognize that anger is a signal that a boundary has been crossed. And, oh, I need to do something here, like set a boundary,
Hmm.
and then maybe later modify that boundary. It was the last, oh my gosh, within the last few months, before Dad passed, that I started to even recognize how I was getting caught up in, I needed to set boundaries around my emotions. And so I'm still learning, but through the caregiving experience, even though I knew and I had started setting boundaries and was having really great success, I was still learning about that, through the whole
Oh
experience.
yeah, it's a work in progress. Is there an example of like a boundary that you had set with your care recipient, or just with somebody that's related to caregiving?
Oh yeah, I can give you just two quick examples. One of them, because they're so different. One of them was we had a caregiver. We had used agencies, we'd done all kinds of different things, but at this point, it was working well. We had a neighbor who lived across the street, and Nellie was able to come over twice a day. So Joe, at this point, we were able to get away for a few weeks at a time. That would dwindle. It started at, as everyone knows, at 8 weeks and 6 weeks and 4 weeks. And then we didn't feel comfortable being away more than, but at this point we could be away for several weeks at a time. Nellie would come over twice a day, and we could email with her, we could check in with her, and we were paying her. And it was arranged through the area agency on aging, and they were fine with that. They knew we were paying a neighbor, and she'd check in, sit with Dad, and they had a great relationship. Well, when we come back and I start getting more and more involved with Dad's care, I realized he needed so much more oversight. Just so I was with them about 6 hours a day, and then worried about him the time that I wasn't there. So we moved in with him. And Nellie kept coming over twice a day. And I told her, just walk in. There's Dad's in the back. There's no need for him to walk up and let you in. Just come in. Well, she was still doing that when Joe and I were there. And Joe and I were working from home. And so her coming in was so disruptive. All of that was just, I would get so frustrated and angry. So I'm like, I had to sit down and have a talk with Nellie. We needed her to come over less often. Dad doesn't want the food. Dad was frustrated that she's coming over twice a day. He really would be happy with like 3 times a week. And I had to present this to her in a way that we love you. We are, and we're still going to pay. That won't change, but it was still so hard because I knew she would take it personally, like she was being rejected.
Hmm.
And so I wrote out the script, and it was just, I felt like to have to go to all this trouble to prepare to have this conversation. It should be so simple, but we had the conversation. It went well for 2 days. And then she was back to her old way. She'd walk in and she'd yell, hello. And like Joe might be on a meeting. And, it was just like so disruptive. So I had to sit down, and I hadn't done some things that I needed to do, which was let her know the consequences if she didn't, kind of honor what we wanted. She was bringing food. Dad didn't want the food. She brought the food again. So, this was hard. These are,
Yeah.
these are folks
Yeah,
who
because
are
she's well-meaning. It's not like she's
absolutely,
being mean and evil. Yeah,
oh my
yeah.
gosh, coming from a place of love. And
Mhm.
so we had another conversation, and it went well, and it worked. Then that worked for quite a while. Um, and that was my frustration and anger. I recognized that. And immediately, because I had been working with boundaries, I'm like, oh, I need to have this conversation. The last example
And I'm
about this
sure,
is,
but I wanted to like you had the conversation face to face, because that's what
oh yeah,
sometimes I see, that people think they can do some of this stuff over text or over an
yeah.
email, and the tone and the things get misconstrued. So things like that I feel like warrant a face to face conversation.
They do. And the things that what I tried to keep in mind was I wanted her to understand that this was about me and how I was feeling in my limits. It wasn't about what she was doing, but I didn't use the word you, just, this is how I'm feeling. I kept it really simple because I could have gone into all kinds of reasons why this was challenging for us, but I knew that wouldn't be helpful. She needed to just hear as few words as possible and know that we cared about her. The thing that I left out in that initial conversation was the consequences. That's a real important part of a conversation about boundaries.
What'd
And
you
you're
tell
right.
her? I'm curious. Like, what were her consequences?
I told her that we wouldn't be able to continue the arrangement. It
Yeah.
just wouldn't be possible. Like we wanted to continue to, there was, we were happy to have her come in and and I really wanted her to understand it wasn't because, she was wonderful, but things had changed. Our situation had changed. Joe
Hmm.
and I were often in meetings and a lot of the work that she would do to help dad come in and just lightly clean up. I could do that now. So,
Yeah, yeah. The you mentioned that you went through the area on aging to kind of get that set up, and I hadn't heard that before. Like we've used neighbors and people that we found like way long ago on Craigslist when that was a thing. But what's the benefit of going through the area on aging? And did area aging find the neighbor, or did you get the neighbor and then go to the area on aging?
so the area agency on aging, they were one of the folks on our list, after dad's stroke. And so I got in touch with them and I didn't know, I just got him signed up on a waiting list. I didn't know what they offered. And every area is different. Our area was pretty well funded because of the number of seniors living, in the area in Florida in that like Tampa Bay area.
Hmm.
So what they came out and they did an evaluation and they assessed what dad's needs were. And their goal is to help folks remain in their home, just to age in place. That's their entire purpose. And so what the social worker like assessed what was going on and asked me what I felt like I needed. At that point, I really didn't know, but I knew I could use the help from, I think I don't know if I'd been looking at agencies or, and I knew that was expensive. And they had two ways we could go about it. One is they could provide somebody, and the other is they would reimburse us for somebody we found, whether it's an agency or just a private caregiver. And so it was a lot of paperwork on my part. And I think about this for other caregivers, like dad could have never, even if he had accepted, which was a whole other challenge, even if he had accepted that he needed help, he wouldn't have been able to complete this paperwork. This is something that as a caregiver, I had to do. It was a lot. And keeping track, the caregivers who came in had to sign the paid caregivers, and each time they came in and we started with an agency, but then I talked to the social worker and there was no, in this area, there was no financial restriction. I know a lot of area agencies on aging do have, they'll, if you make above a certain amount, and dad certainly didn't have a lot of income. But like for example, the VA, at one point he just made just a little bit too much to receive VA
Mm.
benefits, even though he'd been in the war. That's another long story, but so then I contacted the social worker after we'd used an agency and at one point a private caregiver, and said, is it okay if we have a neighbor come in and do the same things and pay her? And she said, no problem. So it was a great program. It was $500 a month. And then in addition, the social worker would come every year and she would evaluate and assess. And so she got us a chair for dad, like a lift chair,
Mm.
recliner. Um, there
But
were other.
they wouldn't pay you to care. Is that right?
No, I really hope that happens down the road.
It's like it's kind of crazy to me. It's like
It is crazy.
you could you could move out, be not related, live next door, and you could get paid. It's I don't understand. Okay,
Yeah,
but
that was
that's where we
frustrating.
are right now.
Hmm.
But
Yep.
that's good to know what they do. So I think we'll
And
definitely add that. Some
just
of
some
yes, they're
agencies,
all the states are different, so people need to look into their state.
and even county to county.
Yes. What so now you said, a year, it's been about a year since dad had passed and I I know what did someone say to me? It's sad but maybe not tragic because what a gift that he got so many years and you had bonus years together, I'm sure with your loving care, but it's still hard to lose a parent and always will be. The how has it been since after caregiving's ended for you? That's been such a big part of your life for so long.
Yeah, it really was. And like I said, it was unexpected. Even though he was 99, we it was very unexpected. And so Joe and I are like our future was kind of on hold, but this was our purpose. And then it's when it's no longer our future, we have to regroup. And so there's this first, of course, this huge void. I'd wake up and I'd go to check on dad. Well, dad's not there. And we had to just wrap up all of his affairs and everything. And it was, it's just tough, like losing a parent. It's one thing I can look back and say he was 99. He had an amazing life. It was fantastic. But when you lose your dad, it's still hard because you're losing your dad, no matter what age, he is. But so it's all just, it's just hard. But yeah, Joe and I can remember we were sitting in his place, things were in boxes, and we're like, we need to take a big trip. We need to regroup and figure out our life going forward. Because while we thought about it, now it's like right in front of us. We have an opportunity to figure out what we want to do. And so we decided right then we were going to take this trip. And we went on a 3-month trip, and we tent camped around the national parks through the north and northwest, and then down south. And we'd been campers, but tent camping for 3 months at this age was quite different. And we just wanted to use it as an opportunity to regroup, just to feel the gratitude for what we were able to do for dad and be with him, but then also try to look forward to our future. And since we're able to work remotely, we were able to work and do that as well. And that's what we plan to do in the future. But I think not, certainly it's not possible for every caregiver to do something like that, but something that can help you kind of get out of that space you were in, maybe where you were all consumed with worry, and start thinking about the future. It really helped us transition.
Yeah, it gave you space to and time to process. Because I know, like, after losing loved ones, I've always wished I could just kind of pause life. And even though you could work remotely, it's just you're still kind of, away from friends and family, even some escape of some sort. I think give yourself the time,
Yeah.
especially initially. Looking back, Teresa, like how were you at infusing your self-care while you were caregiving?
At first, I was pretty bad at infusing self-care. I gained 20 pounds because I was eating whatever I could grab when I was hungry, because I would get to the point where I was so hungry, and just because I was prioritizing dad's care and wasn't thinking about mine at all. And so that, there was that. I had stopped being active. I was always a runner, or, worked out, bike, all of these things, and really just kind of gave all that up. I don't, and it was a slippery slope. I didn't see it coming. Here I think I'm just helping out, and so I can give up, a little bit more of what I'm doing, and ended up in a really bad place. The burnout, the stress, and then no motivation whatsoever, to get back and to start exercising. Meditating was something that I recognized would be helpful. It's something I had tried and failed over and over and over in the past. So I couldn't sit for even a few minutes and not worry. So how would I, the sitting was almost worse than just staying active, because I was just ruminating on the worry. So yeah, self-care completely went to the wayside. And I really didn't practice self-care before. I was practicing it. I didn't realize, I didn't connect it to that is self-care. I just did things that, that were good for my health and well-being
Yeah.
and made me feel better.
Well, people tend to think of the physical parts of self-care. I'm glad that you mentioned the mental and emotional part. But even the things you were doing to get help to come into the house to help you, to have those boundaries that you were setting, like all of those are self-care in my book. Like anything that's going to energize you, give you peace of mind. Um, so I think, but you want to feel your best too. So was there something that kind of happened that was like, okay, I need to start prioritizing my health again?
Yeah, I think it was when I recognized, because you're right, I would have folks come in and help, but I don't know that I was using that time that was made available to me now to really for my self-care. I was
Mhm.
probably working on something for dad, where like paperwork, or so I still wasn't connecting to how I could use that time. And it was when I started looking at, this path isn't sustainable. Why is this so hard? And I started reading up on and trying to figure it out for me so that I could help others. I knew I couldn't help others till I figured it out for me. And I started coming across the articles on meditation, and
Mm.
I started to really try to practice each of these things that I felt like would help. And um, taking the time, setting aside time. I think it was when it clicked that if I'm going to accept, and not if I am, I'm going to accept that this is where I should be. This is what I'm supposed to be doing, because I was railing against that. Then how can I be in a better place for me at the
Mm-hmm.
same time? And that's when talking about the flipping the script, all of that happened kind of in a moment where the spark was there. And then I just had to start moving forward. And not just like, if I'm I've got to see if it was trial and error and tears, see if these strategies worked, and they're all self-care, like you said, whether it's setting boundaries or exercising, going for a run, or meditating. See if they work, figure out how it's all going to work, and then just share some things that others can try. And
Mm-hmm.
then I changed how I ate. I changed how I set up routines. That made a huge difference. I lost the 20 pounds, and it wasn't hard, because all of a sudden things just started to um, I felt empowered. I felt more in control, and that was it. I was chasing control. And I say, you can't, in order to catch control, you have to let it go. And that's when things changed. And I started to look at, if I'm going to do this for a long term, I've got to be in a better place for me, so
Go
that I
with
can
the
be fulfilled.
flow. There's the
Go with the
river.
flow. There
The
you
river.
go.
Yeah. That's so good. And it sounds like meditation eventually clicked with you. And they call it a practice. I think that people think like, "Oh, I can't focus. I can't do it. I'm not good at this. I'm going to stop." But it's a practice. Um, I know for me, I had tried and didn't think it was working. Probably could have stuck with it. And then eventually I did use an app called Calm. I found that the guided meditations were more helpful for me, to remind me like, hey, if you're thinking about something, take a breath. And
Yeah.
was there something that kind of clicked for you?
Yeah, I also used Calm. In fact, I'm using a different app now, Chopra, but Calm was the app I used that really got me there. And the guided meditations worked for me as well.
Well,
And
we'll link to the other app, Chopra, that you use and
yeah, I
Calm
love
too, so
Chopra,
people
and
can
Calm is
try them out.
amazing. The thing that it was so subtle but so powerful when I realized that it was working, and I was committed to stay with it, more so because I felt like I've got to figure out if it works, because I want to help others. And even if I'm not seeing the benefit and it's hard, I'm going to stick with it. And that's what kept me, staying with meditation until it was just, I looked forward to it. What happened was I realized that I was able to take that pause. Dad said something, that triggered me. And rather than just coming back with the first thing I was thinking, which I would never do at work, but in a personal setting, it's like so easy to just react. Well, I was able to pause and say, and how could I handle this differently? Maybe I should take a break and come back. And that had never happened before. It was because of meditating. And I'm like, there's something here. And it was so subtle, but so powerful. And
Mm,
that convinced me that, if we can stay with it, it can make a big difference in our caregiving experience, because
yeah.
that's what we need, is that moment between, action and reaction.
That was for me, it was like so many people, so many famous people were swearing by this. It's like how can we not try it? And I think to your point, like that was kind of my journey too, is like try it on, see if it works. Okay, well maybe this didn't work for me, but it might work for somebody else. I'll talk about it. And there's so many things left to kind of still uncover. Do you still have a meditation practice after caregiving has ended? I
I do. I got really bad about it for a while, and I recognized that I need to start again.
Yeah,
So in
I'm
the
the
last,
same, if I'm being honest, like,
yeah,
it's like a lot of habits, it's like you do them and they're great, and then you fall off and you've got to get back on.
that's right. That's right. And just, the cool thing about these things that we're talking about, and they're all self-care, is they maybe at some point they're not serving you, but then they will again. So you just know that they're there, and you
Mhm.
can pick up, whatever works for you and use it at that time, because your circumstances change through caregiving. So it was just like on the river, and
It's
what
a
works for
raft on the
me.
river that you can reach for, a
That's
little life
right.
preserver. I know
That's
so
right.
many river analogies. I love it.
Yeah.
One of the things that I do is this 22 for 2022, and we'll link to this in the show notes. I have a lot of fun putting this together for myself and then my family members, and it's something I think caregivers could do with their care recipients to kind of make connections. Um, And so like things I have on here, they all have to be fun. They could be healthy, but they're definitely like 4 new hiking trails. I want to help someone cross something off their list. I find that would be fun. I'm doing a weekly restorative yoga session through my Peloton app. Um, I want to go to a thrift store and find some kind of find. And I'm going to read 22 books. I'm going to read way more than 22 books, but it went with the 2022 theme. Wow. But what's something on your list, Teresa, that you want to do in 2022 that's fun?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, so there's this music festival camp. It's Magic Giant is the name of the group. And they put this on out west for 4 days a year. And it's been postponed twice now. And it's
Mm.
all ages. And they're an amazing group. And you get together and there's no, like, you're not connected at all, no Wi-Fi, maybe an hour at night, but you usually don't even want to get on them. And it's just, oh, it's like, it's just the most amazing experience
You've been
ever. So
before.
been before two
Okay.
years. And so this year Joe's going to go with me and I'm so excited. And we'll probably camp, and it's in the redwood forest in Navarro in California. It's just absolutely beautiful and amazing experience. And these guys in the band, usually their parents have come in the past as well, and who are more like our age. And it's just, it'll probably be about, I don't know, 150 of us, and we all have become close and friends because of this group of the musicians. And it's just a 4 days of love fest. So it's
I love
that's
it.
something that's, yeah, that's on the list and something I'm looking forward to. And
We'll
yeah,
link to the list so people can make theirs, and then we'll link to the camp that you're talking about, the music
and I love that
concert.
you do that. I love that you, and I love the idea of doing it with a care recipient. How fun is that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes, because I think there are things. It's like, oh, I know that there's energy when you do it as a group. And so, my kids might put something on that I want to do, or vice versa. And then there could be something then it's like, unless you have the space to kind of have those conversations, it's like you just kind of move into one day to the next day. And then you look back and you're like, what did we do this year? And did we do anything fun? Because caregiving is a lot of work, and it sucks at times,
Yeah.
and there's a lot of good stuff that comes from it too.
Yeah.
So, and making
I wish I'd had that. I totally would have loved doing that with Dad and
yes.
Joe and Dad and I. Yeah.
We'll do it with Joe, and then
Yeah. Good
you
idea.
can create the tradition with y'all for y'all.
Yeah.
All right, we're gonna do the lightning round. Are you ready for some self-care prompts here from my book, Just for You, a daily self-care journal? Um, are you a reader?
I am.
Okay, what are you reading right now?
Oh, well, okay. So I'm reading We Were Made for These Times by, and I'm not sure how to pronounce her name, Kyra Duolingo. And
Is it
it,
fiction or
it's
nonfiction?
nonfiction. And it actually, it's taught, caring for strong emotions, equanimity, and letting go. It's almost freakishly like my book in so many ways. She even has like journal prompts at the end of the chapters. And I normally read books on Kindle, but I just wanted to have it. And
Yep.
so I ordered it. And as I'm reading it, I'm like, oh, this is wild. I love it. I'm just loving it. So
Okay, good. Well, we'll link to that. And I love that you brought up the journal prompts at the end of your chapter, because I love journaling, and it's
yes,
a
I
good
love
way
your
to
journal.
process. Thank you. It's a good way to process things. Um, what do you think? What's the secret truth about happiness?
Oh,
There's no wrong answers here, by the way.
yeah. I think the secret truth, it's so fascinating to see folks who are in such a challenging situation and still they're happy. So it tells me that we can all be happy. And I don't like when I read it, it kind of, it strikes me the wrong way that if you decide whether or not to be happy, like I would never tell somebody that, but for me, I need to keep telling myself that because I
Yeah,
do believe that.
it's an intention for sure. Like,
Exactly.
yes, it's like this is something I'm committed to figuring out how to do.
Absolutely.
Um, What step have you taken recently or plan to take to simplify your life?
Oh, simplify. Well, I think what is complicated for me right now is it's a lot about like deciding how to best spend my time to be most impactful to help other family caregivers. And sometimes I feel like I'm just all over the place and doing too many things then you're not doing any of them well,
Hmm.
whether it's being on too many social media channels or, do I spend my time writing or working on this other thing? So I've been really trying to refine and make sure that how I'm spending my time has the most impact. And even though like I might love to do something, with Canva and maybe and spend time on one social media channel, maybe that's not the best use of my time. I have to look at, am I really connecting with caregivers? Is this the best for them? Because if it's not, maybe I should spend my time elsewhere and simplify. Just it's just, you can be going in so many directions.
Oh, for
And
sure. As a fellow
yeah,
carepreneur, that's what we call
yes.
our entrepreneurs. We have a group like a vision that set goals, and Teresa's a part of that group with me. And it is, it's being a solopreneur. We might have a little help here and there doing things, but it's a challenge. And I have thought like you, like, oh, maybe Mondays or I can bundle and batch all these things and Tuesdays this. But sometimes too, like if you're sitting down to write, you have to be in the right frame of mind. And,
Yeah.
it's just like I can't just sit down and force something out. It's so some of it is like go with the flow again, and then other times. So yeah, when we figure that out, we'll share it with the world. But it's a work in progress for sure. But I say keep doing what you're doing because I know it's helping people. And if it feels like follow your instincts for sure. Okay, this one's a little bit of maybe a sadder question, but I think it's important. Is what do others need to know about your end of life preferences? Like, is there something that going through this experience has gleaned for your what you want to be true at end of life?
Yeah, that's an awesome question. I know that one thing is, and this is maybe a little before end of life, but I just want to make sure that I'm involved in the planning so that somebody else doesn't feel the full burden. Somehow we've got to get to a place where, it's just something, so something shifts. My dad and mom went through what I went through with all that challenge and struggle and frustration, and I want to save somebody else from that. But as far as end of life, I just want to be a tree. I want to be, have you seen that where you can be, your ashes are combined in with a
Hmm.
tree and then a tree grows from that.
No,
And
but I'll add it to the show notes when I find it.
yeah, it's been a while since I looked at it. It's been several years, but considering all of the options, if that is an option, continues to be an option, that's where I think I'd like to, yeah, be set.
And you're making the earth sustainable with that to
Yeah.
become a tree. I love it. We're after Valentine's Day, but close enough. So, what does love mean to you, and how do you show these emotions and actions to yourself? That's our last questions. Is self
Oh,
love.
yeah. Love means just recognizing to me, like my own value, just seeing that I deserve whether it's a self-care or the time that it takes, and showing compassion for myself. I love that, way, if you look at compassion as showing acts of kindness to yourself. I think just keeping that at the forefront, that's really important and it's not selfish. And if I'm able to do that, then I'm able to show up for Joe and show up for his folks. Cause now, that's our kind of our next caregiving
Mm-hmm.
step. And that, I think that's it. Just recognizing that we have value and we deserve to, yeah, treat ourselves well.
Perfect. That's perfect. I have enjoyed our conversation today. Is there anything that we missed that you wish we would have touched on?
No, it's been so great though to talk with you like this.
Thank you. Likewise. So much gifts. There's uh, more and more people are reaching out and helping caregivers, which is wonderful. And there's plenty and plenty of caregivers, 53 million just in the US alone, and a growing number. And we're stronger together. So I love just amplifying what you're doing and sharing your story and connecting people to your resources. And your book is amazing. So, where can people find how to get in touch with you? Where should they go to learn more about the book? What's the best spot to go to?
Probably the best spot is just sustainablecaregiving.com. And, I think if there's a link in your notes about Linktree, then that gets you to all the social media sites.
Yes.
But you have been wonderful and an inspiration, and you were on my radar after I started helping caregivers. I wish I had found you sooner, but you just, and yeah, meeting you at the conference was fabulous. And then we went to dinner. I don't know if you remember,
Yes, I
but
remember. It was a
yeah,
loud
so
little place. We were sitting on a round table in the corner, but
yes, yes, yes. It was awesome. So I just want to thank you for all that you do for caregivers, because, you were able to help me see. I needed to get to that place where I was accepting before I could appreciate being a happy, healthy caregiver, because
Mhm.
I was not. And I just love what you're doing out there. It's so important, so meaningful, impactful.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, that's a good reminder for folks to take a picture of this podcast or and send it to somebody that might be just new on their caregiving journey or just starting out, because both Theresa and I, we share that in common, and a lot of things is like if we can make it just a little bit easier for someone else and just reach back and kind of grab them up to a certain point, that would make a big difference.
Yeah,
Thank you,
that's for sure.
Theresa, for coming on today.
Thank you. Thanks, Elizabeth.